Good evening, everybody. Corey Anderson here. Welcome back. Today we're going to go over our lovely book, The Science of Being Great, otherwise known as How to Be a Genius, written by Wallace D. Wattles. This is by far my favorite of his series, and this is the last one that we're going to go over. This book was written in 1911, 105 years ago. Even though it's pretty good in age, it's still got really great information for us to go over. So before we get started with that, I just want to share a few words of wisdom with you guys. So viewer, whatever it is that you want to accomplish in your life, I just want to tell you this: whatever you feel you can do, that you have the power to do, because that exists within you. Okay, you have the ability to make that happen. Okay, that seed thought was given to you for a reason. You were given that desire for a reason. Okay, the reason you feel you can do it is because you can. With that being said, let's get started on The Science of Being Great by Wallace D. Wattles. Chapter 1. Any person may become great. There is a principle of power in every person. By the intelligent use and direction of this principle, man can develop his own mental faculties. Man has an inherent power by which he may grow in whatsoever direction he pleases, and there does not appear to be any limit to the possibilities of his growth. No man has yet become so great in any faculty, but that it is possible for someone else to become greater. The possibility is in the original substance from which man is made. Genius is omniscience flowing into man. Genius is more than talent. Talent may merely be one faculty developed out of proportion to other faculties, but genius is the union of God and man in the acts of the soul. Great men are always greater than their deeds. They are in connection with a reserve power that is without limit. We do not know where the boundaries of the mental powers of man is. We do not even know if there are any mental boundaries. The principle of power in every person. Okay, before we get started, it sounds like the principle of power in this book may be very similar to how he used the principle of health within The Science of Being Well. If you haven't been over that book with us, that was the one we have read just before this, where Wallace goes over the most basic fundamental principles of living a nice, full, and happy, a life of health and wellness in the most simplest terms, in the most naturalistic way. Okay, and in this one, he's using the principle of power in every man. So we can only assume, so far as we know, that this principle of power within man may be, himself. The power of conscious growth is not given to the lower animals. It is man's alone, and only may be developed and increased by him. The lower animals can, to a great extent, be trained and developed by man, but man can train and develop himself. He alone has this power, and he has it to an apparently unlimited extent. The purpose of life for man is growth, just as the purpose of life for trees and plants is growth. Trees and plants grow automatically and along fixed lines. Man can grow as he will. Trees and plants can only develop certain possibilities and characteristics. Man can develop any power which has been shown by any person, anywhere. Nothing is possible in spirit. Nothing that is possible in spirit is impossible in flesh and blood. Nothing that man can think is impossible in action. Nothing that man can imagine is impossible of realization. Man is formed for growth, and he is under the necessity of growing. It is essential to his happiness that he should continuously advance. Life without progress becomes unendurable, and the person who ceases from growth must either become imbecile or insane. The greater and more harmonious and well-rounded his growth, the happier man will be. There is no possibility in any man that is not in every man. But if they proceed naturally, no two men will grow into the same thing, or be alike. Basically saying right there that no one person is greater than the other. We are all the same in likeness and quality. The only difference is the lines in which we all choose to grow, okay? You are just as great at something as somebody else is great as their own craft, okay? We're all great at our own things that we are doing, okay? We are all great people, okay? We just need to find those channels in which we could express ourselves in the greatest possible way, in order for us to express our own greatness and bring it out to the world. Every man comes into the world with a predisposition to grow along certain lines, and growth is easier for him along those lines than in any other way. This is a wise provision, for it gives endless variety. It is as if a gardener should throw all his bulbs into one basket. To the superficial observer they would look alike, but growth reveals a tremendous difference. So of men and women, they are like a basket of bulbs. One may be a rose and add brightness and color to some dark corner of the world. One may be a lily and teach a lesson of love and purity to every eye that sees. One may be a climbing vine and hide the rugged outlines of some dark rock. One may be a great oak, among whose boughs the birds shall nest and sing, and beneath whose shades the flocks shall rest at noon. But everyone will be something worthwhile, something rare, something perfect. There are undreamed of possibilities in the common lives all around us. In a large sense, there are no, quote, common people, end quote. In times of national stress and peril of cracker-box loafer, of the corner store and the village drunkard, becomes heroes and statesmen through the quickening of the principle of power within them. There is a genius in every man and woman waiting to be brought forth. Every village has its great man or woman, someone to whom all go for advice in time of trouble, someone who is instinctively recognized as being great in wisdom and insight. To such a one the minds of the whole community turns in times of local crisis. He is tacitly, T-A-C-I-T-L-Y. Let's look up the definition of this really quick. Tacitly, or tacitly, T-A-C-I-T-L-Y. Okay, the original root for that is tacit. Okay, and tacit means understood without being openly expressed. Being understood in your own silence. So when you are silent, someone understands that silence. That is what tacit means. Okay, so where were we? To such a one, the minds of the whole community turns in times of local crisis. He is tacitly recognized as being great. He is silently recognized as being great. He does small things in a great way. He could do great things as well if he did but undertake them. So can any man. So can you. The principle of power gives just what we ask of it. If we only undertake little things, it only gives us power for little things. But if we try to do great things in a great way, it gives us all the power there is. But beware of undertaking great things in a small way. Of that we shall speak further on. There are two mental attitudes a man may take. One makes him like a football. It has resilience and reacts strongly when force is applied to it. But it originates nothing. It never acts of itself. There is no power within it. Men of this type are controlled by circumstances and environment. Their destinies are decided by things external to themselves. The principle of power within them is never really active at all. They never speak or act from within. Remember how we were saying earlier, we could only assume, as from what he was saying in the beginning, this principle of power must be something that exists within man. Okay, not something without man. Okay, not something that exists outside of us, but something that exists within all of us. Okay, just like the principle of health. The other attitude makes man like a flowing spring. Power comes out from the center of him. He has within him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. He radiates force. He is felt by his environment. The principle of power within him is constant in action. He is self-active. Quote, he has life in himself. End quote. No greater good can come to any man or woman than to become self-active. All the experiences of life are designed by Providence to force men and women into self-activity, into creating the life of their own dreams, to compel them to cease being creatures of circumstances and master their environment. In his lowest stage, man is a child of chance and circumstance and a slave of fear. His acts are all reactions resulting from the impingement upon him from forces in his environment. He acts only as he is acted upon, just like the football. He originates nothing, but the lowest savage has within him a principle of power sufficient to master all that he fears. If he learns this and becomes self-active, he becomes as one of the gods. The awakening of the principle of power in man is the real conversion, the passing from death to life. It is when the dead hear the voice of the Son of Man and come forth and live. It is the resurrection and the life. When it is awakened, man becomes a son of the highest, and all power is given to him in heaven and on earth. And what is this place he calls heaven? Remember what the greatest teacher said and taught all of us, that the kingdom of heaven is within us. And if this principle of power that he is speaking is something that is found within us, he must be talking about bringing this principle of power out from our own source of heaven, our own life that is within us. Nothing was ever in any man that it is not in you. No man ever had more spiritual or mental power than you can attain, or did greater things than you can accomplish. You can become what you want to be. Now that is the end of chapter 1, The Science of Being Great. On any person may become great. Now I just want to add on to that. If you've been with us in the Master Key System with Charles F. Hannell, I want to talk about the principle of power, attaching the principle of power Wallace D. Wattles is talking about with the greatest mechanism of attachment, which Charles F. Hannell teaches us in the Master Key System. Okay, so lesson 6 in the Master Key System, he talks about the greatest mechanism of attachment that man may use to create the life of his dreams. Now, what is this mechanism of attachment that he is talking about? Okay, so within this book, we talk about the laws. Okay, the law of attraction, the law of vibration, the law of growth, the consciousness which permeates all things, which Wallace D. Wattles calls the original substance from which all things proceed, is the universal consciousness from which all things proceed, or the all-mind, the infinite energy, the intelligence, whatever it is you want to call it, this source, okay, this infinite supply of energy, which we have known to call it God in the religious term. Science calls it the field, or the matrix, or the quantum field, and regardless of what it is, it's all still the same. I like to call it the solar fluid, or the ethereal substance, the psychic element from which all things proceeded. That sounds best to me, that clicks best with me, and when it comes to explaining things, I find that to be the easiest for me to explain it in that specific way. Saying it in with the solar fluid, because everything is emanating from the sun. Okay, but this mechanism of attachment, he uses this mechanism in comparison to a battery with a circuit of cells. Okay, the brain can be seen likened as the brain and cerebral spinal system of your own system can be likened to a battery of cells with its own insulation of wires. Okay, your brain will be the battery, with all of the white matter that your brain is made out of is the circuit from which all the electricity transfers. Okay, remember, the conscious and subconscious. Okay, your conscious part of your brain is the one responsible for voluntary movements. Okay, remember how we used the example before. Okay, when you want to move your phalanges, your brain sends electrical signals all the way down your spinal cord, and that electricity shoots all the way down to these special things called motor neurons within your own muscles, causing the muscle to contract, shocking the sarcomere, causing that sarcomere, which is the functioning unit of the muscle, to contract the actin and myosin, grabbing them together, causing a contraction to pull in, causing the muscle to shorten. Okay, that is how the conscious mind tells the body to move in the external world. Okay, the brain, and with its insulation of wires and the nervous system to travel for the electric current to travel along the sides for you to move your fingers. Okay, so this mechanism of attachment, he talks about thoughts. Okay, when you are thinking, you're literally changing the structure of your brain. Okay, you're creating neural pathways within your own mind. Okay, within your own brain. Okay, so whatever thoughts you are thinking, and whatever thoughts you think habitually, holding on to those thought forms, you're creating those neural pathways within your brain. Okay, remember they also use the analogy of your mind being like a garden. Okay, when you think a seed, you're planting that thought seed into the ground. The more you think that thought, the more you start to water that seed. Eventually, the more you start, as that seed begins to sprout and grow, those thoughts will be easier and easier for you to think, and eventually it'll become a plant in harvest, and it'll become your habitual way of thinking, and there will be no conscious part on yours. That's just your habitual way of thinking, becoming your character, forming who you are, and that's what you go on to express in the external world. Okay, that is how thinking, when you think, you are setting brain cells into activity. He also talks about concentration and attention. That concentration and attention is one of the most fundamental principles that any successful person can have, because you need to be able to concentrate on a specific thing. Because when you're thinking and concentrating on certain thoughts, and he also compares this with the magnifying glass. Okay, so when you take a magnifying glass and you focus a ray of light, the effect of that ray will make itself apparent. Okay, whatever you're focusing it to will cause that, whatever it is, that objectivity to burn. Okay, we all felt that. Okay, when we focus the ray of light with the magnifying glass on our hand or something, we can feel that burning sensation, then immediately we pull away. Okay, likewise with your thoughts. When you're concentrating on a specific thought in purpose, on a specific goal, you're constantly thinking about that goal and whatever it is you're trying to achieve and the dreams you're trying to accomplish, whatever you're trying to create for yourself, doing things that make you happy. Okay, you are setting, you are setting those brain cells into activity, and as those brain cells collect, they start to form the structure in your brain. Okay, remember those neural pathways that we were talking about? They start to structure and form in that specific way, becoming your character, becoming your own habitual way of thinking, making you express that in the external world. That is how we use this mechanism of attachment in order to express our life in the external world. Okay, because just as the battery is for its electrical circuit, okay, the electrical circuits travel along from, okay, the battery will pick it up from the original, okay, the battery is the source of the electricity. Okay, the electrical circuit is what extends this electricity out to wherever it is. Likewise with you, your thought is the circuit, and your brain is the attachment of the mechanism that forms into that circuit, and then that mechanism goes out shooting that specific, creating that specific pathways, creating those specific channels within your own self. Okay, I have a lot of learning to do when it comes to explaining that in a more simpler way, but as far as I know, that is the best that I could explain it with how far we have gone with what we know. And I wanted to share that with you really quick because that connects well with heredity and opportunity, because we are not bound by mental boundaries. There is no limit to the expansion of your mind. And that being said, thank you for watching this first chapter with me. And next we have heredity and opportunity. And I'll see you when I see you.